Oh, I just love these little porters. Can we adopt one and take it home?
I can see where some people have done just that.
Oh my gosh, wouldn't that be fun to have that as a backyard railroad?
Well, we're thinking about building like 4 of these, right, in
Exactly.
1/20th scale.
Right.
So we've been talking to Dawn about it. But as you would say, they are just stinking cute.
Oh, they are.
The perfect little choo-choo. Anyway, we're still here at the Great Western Steam-Up
Right.
in Carson City, Nevada, at the Nevada State Railroad Museum, Carson City.
What fun.
What fun. And this car is the subject for today. This is one of the most, I think anyway, one of the most significant pieces of railroad history in any railroad museum anywhere in America.
Right.
It was originally built for the Central Pacific Railroad, and then they sold it to the Virginia and Truckee, which is how it ended up here. And then because it was the Virginia and Truckee, of course, in the 1950s and 60s, it ended up being used in TV shows and movies and stuff.
How fun.
So it's got the wrong paint job on it, and it's been hacked into and altered in a lot of different ways. But its original history as part of the Central Pacific places it here
Oh, neat.
at the driving of the Golden Spike in Promontory, Utah on May 10th, 1869. There's very little of the original railroad equipment left that was here on that day. And the only pieces that I know of, there are 2 of the original passenger cars that were part of the Central Pacific trains that were there that day. And as far as I know, that's it. Everything else has been destroyed. But if you look in this picture here, toward the back of the train here, the Central Pacific train, there's that car.
Oh my goodness.
Isn't that something?
Wow.
And that really brings it to life.
It sure does.
It's often referred to as the commissioner's car.
Oh.
But it was Charles Crocker's private car. Of course, he was one of the 4 original owners, builders of the Central Pacific. I'm not sure why it's a commissioner's car. If anyone knows, they should jump into the comments and let us know. But this was Crocker's private car, and I would assume that all 4 of the principal owners of the railroad all had their own private cars. But for whatever reason, Lealand Stanford used this car to travel to Promontory. Charles Crocker's car.
Neat.
All of these guys went on to form great businesses, Crocker Bank, and of course we know Stanford from him being the governor of California, Stanford University, all of those kinds of things. Anyway, Charles Crocker did not travel out to the driving of the Golden Spike. Lealand Stanford did.
Oh.
And since he was president of the railroad at the time, I suppose it made the most sense. And as these were the people who started the Transcontinental Railroad in the very beginning, it also made sense that the honor would fall to Lealand Stanford to place the very last spike in the laurel tie at Promontory. In this painting, we can see Stanford in the center of the frame here, holding the silver track maul that was made for just gently tapping the spikes on top of the laurel tie once they were placed into pre-drilled holes. So you can see the Central Pacific locomotive Jupiter here in this frame. Isn't that a beautiful engine?
Oh my goodness, it's just wonderful.
Now, there are the 2 locomotives that are there at the Golden Spike National Historic Site in Utah, but those are just reproductions of these engines. The originals were simply scrapped out.
Isn't that something?
And almost all of this equipment was scrapped out. But the Jupiter pulled a 2-car train from Sacramento up to Promontory Summit, and one of those cars survives.
Oh, neat.
And one of the things that I find fascinating, not only did Stanford ride in this car, at least one of the Golden Spikes, the last spike, the one we know so well, rode in this car. And I'm pretty sure 2 of the Golden Spikes were taken to the event in that car. Of course, originally there were 4 golden spikes taken up there because the tie holds 4 spikes. And one of those spikes was lost in the 1906 earthquake, the one that was supplied by a newspaper there in San Francisco. And I'm pretty sure that one also rode in the car. But the one in the center there, the Hughes spike, had been made by a man named Hughes and then given to Stanford to be taken to the event and used as the very last spike in the construction of the railroad. So that spike rode on that car.
Isn't that something?
It's just amazing.
Oh my gosh.
Now, we did that one show on the 3 surviving spikes.
Right.
And here's a link to that show. This is the silver spike, or should we say a reproduction or recreation of the silver spike that was presented by the state of Nevada. The original spike was just hammered out of a chunk of silver and dropped into the tie. And then later on they thought better of that, melted it down, and had a jeweler make this spike.
I see.
At any rate, the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad, I think, has to be seen as the most important moment in American railroad history.
I would think so.
And this car, as it says here, was a witness to that history. It was there.
Right.
Now, it is not in great shape.
No.
And as we were saying, it was used in movies and TV shows. It's got some strange paint job on it right now.
Oh my goodness, yes.
And it's had holes drilled in it and modifications made to it. The museum here in Carson City has started a restoration on it, and they've uncovered some of the original wood. I know when a museum is attempting to restore something like this, there's always a great debate. What here is original, what's been replaced over the years, what should be replaced as part of the restoration, and what is critical to be left intact because otherwise you're destroying the artifact.
Right, it's original.
Yeah, so that's a debate to have. And if we look at this car closely, we can see that they've done a good deal to stabilize it. They've put a lot of metal inside the car to reinforce the frame because the main beams are completely rotted away. So does that mean you replace the main beams, or as they're the original main beams, are they too important historically, or do you just leave them? These are tough decisions to make.
Oh, they sure are.
Boy.
Well, as long as they're leaving it as a museum piece, I think these should leave as much as they can. Maybe new paint and make it look nice.
Yeah, you'd want it to look brand new, but you'd also want to leave as much of the original artifact
Right.
intact as possible. But there are places like this where there have been holes drilled.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that's all about.
No idea what's going on here, but where this thing was used in TVs and movies, that could be a leftover from that. And then we can see the end sills here have been completely rebuilt, probably by the museum here in Carson. So just difficult. And I like here where they've removed some of the siding so that we can see the original wood.
Right.
And see the condition of that. Now, just on the other side of the Sierra Nevada mountains, we find the California State Railroad Museum in Sacramento, California. And I would call that the definitive Transcontinental Railroad Museum. They have the best collection of transcontinental equipment there, but they also have a lot of Virginia and Truckee equipment.
They sure do.
Just like the people at Carson City. So there's a lot of equipment that they share in common, or interest that they share in common. And this locomotive, number 12, the Genoa, was taken to the steam up from the museum there in Sacramento.
Oh, neat.
And it's going to be on loan here for 2 years, and some of the equipment from here is going to be sent down there for the same 2 years. This is the Dayton, which is a Virginia and Truckee engine, but it was actually built by the Central Pacific in the shops in Sacramento, which is also the location of the California State Railroad Museum.
Oh, how neat.
So this is going down there for 2 years, and that other locomotive is coming up here for 2 years. And that's just really neat to see. But you can see here, the builder's plate here on the Dayton isn't a Baldwin. It says it's built by the Central Pacific Railroad.
Oh my goodness.
So it raises the question, which of the two museums would it best be displayed at? And arguably both.
Yes.
And so that's why they're trading back and forth. Now, here's another Virginia and Truckee engine, the Bowker, number 21. Mm-hmm. And that really and truly doesn't fit the museum in Sacramento. It's a great little Virginia and Truckee engine, but by all rights, it should be here at Carson. But you can make the same argument that the commissioner's car, should therefore be on display in Sacramento.
Oh, right.
Not here at Carson. So the scuttlebutt is that there's a trade in the works to trade the commissioner's car here for the Bowker.
Oh, how neat.
And I think that would be incredibly appropriate to send Crocker's car, the Golden Spike car, to Sacramento and leave the Bowker here in Carson at the Virginia and Truckee Museum, or what by all rights is the Virginia and Truckee Museum.
Right. They sure have some interesting artifacts from the Transcontinental Railroad here in Sacramento.
I love this display here inside, ostensibly inside the tunnel at Donner Summit, the Lealand Stanford.
Isn't that neat?
Central Pacific number 1, still owned by the Stanford family.
Isn't that neat?
Isn't
oh my
that
gosh.
Cool? But where they've got such definitive Transcontinental Railroad history and equipment here at this museum, it does seem like this would be the most appropriate place.
Oh, absolutely.
For the commissioner's car.
Sure.
Now, one of the very interesting things they have here is a 5th Golden Spike.
What?
Well, a lot of people don't know that there were 4 Golden Spikes that were placed in the Laurel Tie at Promontory, but Hughes made the spike that we know so well as the last spike, gave it to Stanford, and then sort of wished, I guess, that he still had it. So he just made another one.
Oh, well, there you go.
Or he had the jeweler that made the first one make an identical or an almost identical one. And this is the second Hughes spike. So there's 2 of these spikes that were made by Hughes. One was given to Stanford. Now this is the casting sprue.
Right.
And on the second spike, the Hughes spike, the sprue was never removed. On the first one, the sprue was removed and used to make jewelry items like this little watch fob here.
Isn't that neat?
Isn't that cool?
Oh my gosh.
So rings and fobs and all sorts of things that were passed out to dignitaries at the driving of the Golden Spike.
Wow.
But this 5th spike still has its casting sprue in place.
I think that's just neat.
And that's the easy way to tell the difference between the 2 different spikes. And I mentioned that there was a second car that survives from the driving of the Golden Spike at Promontory.
Really?
And it's this car here. And it's much better known than the other one. This was built for the Central Pacific by Wason and Company, and then quickly transported to New York City. And then from New York City, it was taken by rail to Omaha, turned over to the Union Pacific, and then attached to the Union Pacific train for the trip to Promontory. Then once the rails were completed, it was transferred to the Central Pacific train and tagged on behind the commissioner's car and taken all the way to Sacramento.
Oh my goodness.
And so it crossed over the entire Central Pacific here en route to Sacramento.
Wow.
So this particular car has the claim to fame of being the first train car to travel all the way from New York City to San Francisco by rail.
Oh my.
And so it was preserved, and it's actually part of a private collection.
Okay.
And it's currently at the California State Railroad Museum, but it still belongs to a different individual who wants to hang on to it and display it in his own collection. I think it would be really lovely if it just stayed in the museum at Sacramento. Now, once it arrived at Sacramento, well, the railroad ended at Sacramento. And they wanted to make sure this car made it all the way to the Pacific. So here in Sacramento, it was loaded onto a Southern Pacific riverboat, a paddle wheeler, and taken down the Sacramento River, and then offloaded onto the Central Pacific, or the Southern Pacific, all these different Pacific railroads. So this car actually made it all the way to the Presidio at the Pacific Ocean. So the very first car to travel all the way from the Atlantic to the Pacific, mostly by rail.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's just cool.
And it still exists. So that's 2 cars that were there at Promontory. And if the trade goes through, both of those cars will be at this museum, at least for the time being.
Wow.
In Sacramento.
So now there's a good reason to visit this, and even more.
Yeah, there's already such a great collection of these early transcontinental locomotives here. And now, at some point, we hope, in the near future, both of these cars fully restored on display here at the California State Railroad Museum.
Which is like visiting a gigantic jewelry box, in my opinion.
Well, these early locomotives are jewelry.
Oh my gosh, no kidding.
Yeah, they look like they're made of gold.
Right, a Swiss watch, just precise and beautiful.
Just gorgeous, and I think worth way more than gold.
Yes.
Anyway, they're also increasing the size of this museum. I know the pandemic and various things have sort of slowed that process down, but the intent is to dramatically increase the footprint of this museum. And now they'll have some additional material to display here.
Right.
And then we'll have to get right back out there.
That's true.
Because there's always plenty of good reasons to visit the California State Railroad Museum in Sacramento. And no matter how the trades turn out, right now they're transporting these locomotives back and forth between the 2 museums, so maybe people will be able to see different displays at each museum at different times. And that'd be really cool.
I think it's okay. I think it's wonderful.
That's a grand idea. Well, if you're not a member of the channel or a subscriber to the channel, you can do either or both by clicking on the blue button upcoming just about now.
There it is.
The blue button right there. Well, we're not sure how you found this video on the internet. We hope you didn't find it boring, and we will see you here on Tuesday because we're going to be playing with a turntable.
Oh, we are.
See ya.
We'll see ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.